Welcome to Together, a higher ed podcast where we bring you stories, insights, and experiences from voices across the higher education sector. I'm Chase Haygood, the Vice Provost for Student Success at the University of Utah. Today we're joined by a good friend and colleague, Cathy Badger, the Senior Associate Athletics Director for Academic Services in Athletics at the University of Utah. Cathy oversees the Academic Services Unit, providing support to student athletes as they pursue their degree and success well beyond the university. Welcome, Cathy. We're glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Chase.
Absolutely. Well, again, as we have a number of folks come in and speak with us and share insights and experiences, this podcast is really hearing from folks and taking time to truly listen about experiences that folks have had and both successes and failures and challenges and the opportunities that you're facing in your current work and that you've seen in your past and that you might anticipate for the future. So to get us started, if you're willing, I'm hoping that you'll tell us a little bit more about your role in Utah athletics and how you found yourself into that role here at the U.
How I found myself into the role is a longer story. This is my 18th year in athletics, in the athletic space, in the academic space. And it's a space that I find myself every day just with that passion to help students. So I think that started a degree in secondary English and chemistry education. So education was going to be a part of my journey from the beginning. And then at other institutions, working my way up through the academic space, ultimately into the director role, which brought me to the University of Utah and the athletic department here. So I'm fortunate to oversee an amazing team of advisors and work with some incredible student athletes.
That's awesome. What in that work, and we'll come back around to some of your past experiences as well, because you have had an incredible wealth of experiences. One of the reasons I was really delighted to chat with you today about those experiences. What do you enjoy most about your work with student athletes and an incredible staff? I'll give you that too. An incredible, sure. Just really great group of folks.
Knowing that you have an impact, the impact every day, whether it's having a conversation with a student athlete, working with coaches, working with our staff, that's what really is the drive, is to have that long-lasting impact. You never know which conversation is going to be the moment when a student hears you and that light bulb goes on and you say, yes, that was it. Or they think about it later and they come back to you and say, hey, you said that and I thought about that. That is so fulfilling. So even through the tough and stressful days, and we all know we have them, those are the moments that really fill your cup back up. Or you get an email from a student that you worked with years ago that says, hey, I remember you. Those are cup-filling moments that you need to have.
Awesome. And I would imagine, tell me if this is right or wrong, for you in your role, you try to anticipate, or even for teams that you lead, right, the ability to have more of the days or moments that are cup filling than, or have as full as you can, right, a reservoir for the times that are going to be challenging.
Definitely.
Yeah. So this may take us a little bit off script for a minute, but the favorite sport, because I know we have seats that are near each other.
Yes.
In a couple of different venues as we watch our student athletes. What's your favorite to attend? And I know that may be hard.
Ooh, to attend?
To watch our student athletes compete.
So I started playing soccer when I was 5. I played in college. I'm fortunate to play at a Division I institution. So soccer is always my passion. And it's always my love. But I will tell you, and you've seen from our seats being close, I'm a very passionate individual in any sport event.
Yeah.
Gymnastics, basketball, football. We try to attend everything. Our track meets, so much fun. Going to softball games, baseball games, just all of it to experience that, to see our student athletes. You're fortunate to have beach volleyball, lacrosse, right outside your back door here. So we just, great student athletes, very passionate and driven. So it doesn't matter the sport to see, you're seeing them in their element, and that is always fun.
Yeah. So I will say a quick story. When I first arrived at Utah, that first winter, I was sitting in my office here in the Sill Center, and I looked out and above, and there's some kind of deer. They're mule deers, I think, here in Utah, which are just ginormous when you compare them to like deer in the southeast. But more impressive than that was the fact that as I looked up the hill, there's the lacrosse team like practicing scrimmaging or something like that in the snow.
Yes.
And-
This is my not shocked face. Completely.
And I was just like, okay, that to your point, they are committed.
Absolutely.
They are out there doing the hard work. And especially, I think, like for student athletes, I mean, that commitment is kind of like, it's integrated, or like it's multi-pronged, right? It's a commitment to success in the classroom. And we're going to talk about in a minute the immense success that the University of Utah Athletics has seen in terms of completion rates and students just, I like to say, they're knocking it out of the park. They are doing, I mean, they're scoring goals left and right, and they're succeeding as students.
Absolutely. And the lacrosse team specifically, we need to remind them from time to time that there is a threshold that we are not supposed to be outside practicing at a certain low degree of temperature. We need to stay inside for a little bit. They don't listen sometimes.
Yeah.
But great coaching staff, great guys, big personalities there.
Yeah.
Again, another great addition to the athletic department when we added them. But I will say on the excellence piece, I've been fortunate to work with a few teams that have won national championships. And when they do, it's because they are driven to have excellence in every aspect of their world. At the athletic space, the academic space, those were some of our best GPAs because they were locked in and said, I will be excellent at everything. Nutrition, sleep, recovery, all of these things, all of those areas as our support services to student athletes. Academics only being one portion of that.
Sure.
Everybody working together, very similar to how the institution runs. We look at students not only for what is your major, but how can we holistically help you develop? Yes, your major is a portion of that, but we want to help you with character development. We want to help you with critical thinking skills. We want to do all of these things so when you leave here with a degree, that you are a successful, productive graduate. Hopefully, you're passionate about whatever it is that you're doing. That's my goal every day working with student athletes. I want them to find an area that they're passionate about just as much as I am every single day in what I do. I'm so lucky to have that space. If every student we touched had that, what a world we would live in.
I know, right? I mean, a lot of folks will talk about, and hearing you describe it, Cathy, I think, and having been privileged to work with you, I think it is, in fact, a type of a calling to be able to do this work that as you look out, it's like we all, or some of us, continue to get older and older and older. And yet we work with the demographic of folks that never seem to get older, right?
Nope.
And along the way, our ability or the kind of calling that it is to kind of ride alongside in a support, mentoring, certainly teaching, coaching roles to see, you know, folks at critical moments of their life, both traditional and non-traditional students, to see them come into the institution. And if we're doing our job right and they're doing their job right as student, as learner, then they leave the place transformed.
Absolutely.
You know, and there is something just really, really, as I hear you describe it, it's something really special about that, right? It's hard to try to explain that to folks who don't work in education. I wonder if you find that to be the same, where...
I do.
Yeah.
I do. When you, and again, in our space, we're fortunate to have a closer relationship. We've got a smaller student to advisor ratio. So a lot of the students that we recruit as freshmen, sophomore, juniors in high school are then the ones we can help persist to graduation. So we may have them for a much longer period of time than, say, a campus advisor. So watching some of that development, you get them as a freshman and then have them leave as a senior. Just that transformation is a lot of fun to watch. And you've seen them through the struggles. You've seen them overcome. And some of them struggle mightily. And then we have to figure out where that success comes, and we do it together. So that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to be a part of many of those journeys.
Yeah, and then no doubt you get the wedding invites and the birth announcements and the...
Those are fun too.
Bar mitzvahs and you just get it all, right? They all come kind of back around because of the investment that you've made in people's lives.
Oh yeah, when they come through in our professional arenas here in Salt Lake City as well, it's fun to swing by and say hello.
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, I'm flying through the city.
Yeah.
Are you still there?
I'll stop
yeah,
and say hello. I'm like, oh yeah. Oh, why don't you come up to the suite and meet some people? I'm sorry. Me? Okay. Okay. Are you sure? Yeah. Okay. Those are, again, fun moments, those full circle moments.
Yep. I love it. So, are there new or exciting student success initiatives that you'd like to talk about that you're really excited about? Things that you all are working on now, or things that you all have launched and you're kind of like, we're in that kind of initial stage and we know it's going to pay off and we're going to stick with it?
New and exciting. I mean, they're new and exciting for
Sure.
me.
Yeah.
And I think for our space, we are fortunate to have some great centers on campus, math, business, writing, and with them partnering with the Learning Center. I think often people view athletics as a silo, and really breaking that stigma and saying, hey, we partner with people on campus. My job is to make friends with people on campus. I love that part of my job. It's lots of fun. But we have a phenomenal learning center, and Casey does a great job. We partner with her and Brandon Johnson to make sure that our student athletes have access to some of those resources, the tutors and things like that. So they are great to work with, and those tutors are able to come over to our athletic space and meet the student athletes, in a comfort space. They know our academic center, but also it's open some different hours so they can come before practice, after practice, those types of things. So fortunate to have some great tutors for our student athletes to utilize. Other thing I think we're focusing on with the changes in athletics, and I'll touch on some transfer portal changes are a challenge these days. I'll leave it at that. Really making sure we're paying attention to our transfer students and onboarding them to the institution. Some of them we get a long runway. We know they're coming for a few months. We're able to get transcripts. We're able to onboard them easily. Others come very last minute, and that onboarding is condensed, and still putting in that time and energy and effort to make sure that they feel comfortable at a new institution. They have previous experience with college level, whether it's community college or another four-year institution, but they need to understand Utah. And we are going to ask a high level of academics from them. Some of them, that's an adjustment. Others come from a equally excellent four-year institution, and it may be a little easier. But making sure we're giving each one of those transfer students the opportunity to have a good transition. So that's been a changing landscape, and the number of transfer students coming to the athletic space has increased. So we've definitely focused more time, energy, and effort into those students.
Well, for sure, you've got you have our gratitude and deep thanks in that space. I mean, especially as you say, as students, particularly those that have that condensed experience, they need the experience nonetheless. And as you all are providing it, no doubt, a quality experience, and at the same time, really testing our systems and our protocols that can be ever more student-centered, right, as an institution, as we aim to deliver an exceptional educational experience for every student. That's student by student, one by one. And it's in the athletic space, you and a whole team of folks who are keeping us honest on that. So I'm grateful. We are all grateful for that work. If I can ask, because, some of the folks that are no doubt listening or watching, the way that we think about those, the kinds of initiatives you've named and others, when we think about in higher ed, the ability to know whether or not something's working, over the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, there's been that shift for a variety of reasons, good and maybe not so good, but reasons, to think about. And I'll just back up. I think there are a lot of really good reasons in the space, like really good, significant reasons. How do we think about whether we know an initiative or a program is working? Like, what does that look like in, when you're trying to assess and evaluate impact?
Some of it is not measurable, in my opinion. Some of it's a feeling. Some of it's saying, how have our student athletes adjusted, reacted? Have they come back and used a resource more than a few times? So it's usage. Have they given verbal feedback? We know our students are not shy. And sometimes that feedback comes through others. Sometimes it comes through social media. And we'll say, oh, we didn't know that was a problem until you posted about it. We're happy to look at that. So I think assessment in a small scale is sometimes challenging. When we look at it from a larger scale, and we mentioned graduation already, that's really where we see, is what we're doing working? Our goal is graduation. And I believe our answer right now, and it has been for a number of years, is yes. We are fortunate to graduate 94% of our student athletes. That's fantastic.
It is.
And just with our conference realignment in the Pac-12, previously we were second to Stanford, 97% for them, so 94%. We're very proud of that. And changing conferences, still very high in the Big 12. Actually dropped to third, surprisingly, behind Cincinnati and Iowa State, great institutions. So I'm looking at those two schools saying, hey, if you're above us, what are you doing that we can learn from, and how can we partner? Because we obviously want to continue to improve. Yeah. So with those graduation rates, I think that's something that we're very proud of and we'll continue to work on. But if it's only 94, anytime you're still an A, but I would like to be 100%. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're still gonna to work towards that. But in that capacity, I think that's something measurable and that's something comparable. So we can look at other Power 4 institutions and say, okay, how are we doing? But peer and aspirant institutions for us, not always just our conference. We're looking at some others as well. So that's important for us to keep that in mind. But I mean, to me, that says yes.
Yep.
And if a president of our institution is happy to report that data, as my athletic director, Mark Harlan, fabulous. They get very excited about those numbers. So that to me means that they're pretty important across the board, not just to us in academics.
No, absolutely. I think that's quite right. And as you know, I mean, we're making the hard strides. We're having those kind of hard conversations across the institution. I think there's so much given, like as we define, and we do, student success within the institution, persistence, retention, completion, a student's sense of self-efficacy, and their ability to have job placement. I mean, those are the main constituent parts, right, of how an institution, particularly the University of Utah, defines what student success is. Mm-hmm. And that's a shared responsibility that we're all in together. No one unit is going to pull off that complex of a definition and seeing it come to full fruition. So I'm eager to share with folks here, and I'd love for you to kind of, across the breadth of your experience in higher ed, so not just at the University of Utah, but across your career, Cathy, the ways in which you think about strategies that academic kind of success units within athletics, the strategies that are deployed there, that from your perspective and from your opinion, or from your opinion, what is it that the rest of a university, not just the University of Utah, but just in general, things that happen in that space that lead to really great completion metrics that should in fact or could be adopted by the larger university in ways that from your your perspective again would have positive impacts on an institution?
Yeah. We are fortunate to have, and I mentioned this briefly, some great touch points with our student athletes. So it's not just talking to them once a semester for advising. It's having those regular touch points to say, hey, thanks for coming in. Great to talk about your classes for next semester. Why don't we look at your 4-year plan? Let's talk briefly about how that works. So as the student leaves, they are not only thinking about the next semester, but it's already in their mind that they've got a plan for the future. They've got a plan for 4 years. It's less scary for our students if they say, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. You don't need to. Let's just talk about the next year. But let's talk about the next year. Let's make sure we're having those long-term conversations, build that relationship. So when the student wants to come back, because they hopefully will, that you've already got some basis for that long-term conversation. Also saying, hey, great to see you. Why don't you come back in a month and let's talk about this again? Again, other institutions, that advisor to student ratio, we're fortunate to have a low one. So the low the lowest we can get for that, I think, is important. And that's where we've had some of our success. Very targeted approach with our communication, not just mass blasting to, oh, I work with 4 teams, I send out the same message to everyone. Everything's tailored a little bit more, so it feels personal, but you're making those appointments for them to come back. And it's applicable in again, so many different spaces in that capacity. Proactive strategies when students are struggling. And we're fortunate at this institution, as you're well aware, Chase, our AASC, our Academics Advising Standards Council, doing great work in that space and already looking at proactive advising, how we can bring that into the fold, how we can maybe seasoned advisors that don't have that lens, how we can say, hey, this is something we've seen, this is a success point, let's continue adding this to our bag of skills. We are excellent at this, how can we continue to grow? Where we are is great, but we want to continue to get better. So we're constantly challenging and looking at the type of student that's coming in and how we can have adaptive advising to the changing student populations as they enter our institution. So never being satisfied with the status quo, I think, is part of that. But I think many areas are already having that mindset. So.
I love it. One of the first things that first point, it sounds a lot, tell me that I'm wrong, it sounds a lot like the approach is very much kind of more partner or a partnership kind of mindset.
Yes.
Rather than, I don't know, I'll just describe it as like an old school, like you come to me and I've got all the answers for you. And which often, or I think it did, perhaps when we were both undergrads or even prior to that, it's like, I have the answers, you don't. Why don't you? Here's your checklist. Get out of my office.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I like the way you said that partnership approach.
Right.
It takes a village to help a student athlete get to graduation.
Yep.
And an advisor is one piece of that puzzle. So how can we continue to be a resource? How do I want to have such a good, and you may only get that first shot, that first impression.
Yep.
It could be at orientation. The impression that you make there is the one that's going to last. So how do we make that such a positive impact? I mentioned transition earlier. How do we make that transition from high school to the University of Utah a fabulous one? So when you go home for holiday break after your first semester, you tell everybody, I loved it. It was amazing. It was great. You should want to come to Utah as well.
Yeah.
That's what we want. We want that feeling, because it's a feeling.
Yeah.
You've got to get that feeling that you are a part of it, that piece of being part of the University of Utah.
I love that because, I mean, there are elements in there, as I hear you describe it, Cathy, that at least for me, it's like, well, that's what we mean by a kind of, both within literature and within practice, the sense of not only student success, but of a strategic enrollment management, right? Like building momentum with a student that once they're recruited and they make their way to the university, that they want to keep coming back, right? And that we're partnering with them when they hit barriers ahead of time. We try to be proactive and, see where, because, they're not the first students we've ever had, right? And we might know a couple of things about the kinds of barriers that students would hit, be they financial or whatever. We know where our most challenging courses are. It's not about lowering rigor, but it's about understanding students we have, the students we want to see succeed. And as you say, all of us doing that work together, that at the end of, year one, all those students are excited to come back and become year two, right? Or maybe even take some classes in the summer. Students, if you're watching, summer classes.
Ooh, summer classes.
Stay on that path.
Yeah, it's the identity piece. It's that the university becomes part of their identity. It's advancing the education becomes part of their identity. Well, of course I'm going to do that. That's just what I'm going to do. I've already decided I'm going to do that.
Yeah. How much of, and I think a lot of folks have perceptions about athletics. I've been privileged now at two large R1s to partner closely with athletics to ensure that we're all doing everything we can, that all students can be successful, and all students includes our student athletes, Absolutely. Of course. How much of student athletes' experience on teams do you think kind of feeds into some of that positive momentum?
I mean, I think a lot of it. There's so much development that happens. Obviously, as an elite athlete, you've played your sport for a number of years. So that teamwork, that willing to band together to be successful, that willing to overcome obstacles and adversity, resilience, a lot of that is character building, and I think translates from the athletic space into an academic space and ultimately into life as well. If we're going to look big picture there. But those are a lot of skills that are so transferable. Many employers target hiring student athletes because they know they will work hard. They know they've excelled under adverse conditions, those types of things. So it's a great selling point for us when we're recruiting students to come to the University of Utah to say, hey, we've got a number of fabulous graduates. That could be you, or let us help you forge your own path. And be great in a space that we don't have any fabulous graduates yet, but that could be you. So dream big.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned it earlier, I have to ask the question about conference realignment for a second. No doubt, it's impacted the university community, right? And we are now a proud member in the Big 12.
Yes, we are.
So I'm wondering if you could speak to its impact on student athletes from your perspective, student athletes as well as their academic endeavors, and along the way any changes or opportunities or challenges again that the conference realignment kind of brings about.
A touch too early for us to kind of know for sure yet. We're 2 months in. So a little bit early. I can tell you, I feel like the anxiety around the conference realignment has really died down. For our student athletes, give me a competitor, we will beat them. Like bring that. That's the I'll say the swagger of the Utah Athletic Department, because we've had so much success in so many different venues and areas and sports. So the navigating the travel piece, I think, is the part that we're still trying to figure out, especially in the academic space. Are we doing regional scheduling? Are we doing national scheduling? Every sport has looked at a different scheduling model. So we are still navigating those spaces for our spring sports. We just finally got some schedules for our winter sports. That's very late compared to, if we're in a regular cycle. So next year will be a bit earlier. So now that we're trying to figure those things out and having our travel partners, if that's what we're going to do in those things. So I think that space is the part where we're still navigating some questions, and that ultimately impacts our student athletes. Where are we going? When are we going? How are we getting there? What does that travel look like? Are we staying extra nights at locations because we can't get flights back to Salt Lake City early enough? So navigating some of that piece does have some anxiety to it. But again, you mentioned that team aspect. It's kind of like we're all in it together. We'll figure it out. And the thing we're blessed with is great communication within the department. Coaches get it. We have administrators that get a schedule. They disseminate that to everybody. We sit down and look at it. Sleep and recovery looks at it. Sports Psych and Wellness says, okay, how can we do this? How can we look at mental health? Like all of these pieces come together to ensure that our student athletes have the best opportunity for success, academically and athletically.
I can't help but, think about the way, thanks for that, and the way that, thinking about the travel schedule, which a lot of people speculated, as we made the realignment. Part of that, too, as I think about student athletes and the experiences that they're having that in many ways are similar and in many ways very different, that as they travel as a team, or you might call them a cohort, as they make that travel, that is very much a kind of preparatory experience for the world of work. The ability to manage multiple priorities and multiple commitments inside one's life, right? While at the same time moving around on planet Earth.
Absolutely.
And I think from my perspective, the realignment and all that, and the ability, I've watched you and your team support students, no doubt with the other parts of the athletics department and those colleagues that you have, put students first. How do we do this in putting students first, which is, something I think many of us have in common, shared values in that space. So thanks, Cathy.
Yeah.
Last question. We ask all of our guests this question. And that is, we're thinking here about, name of the podcast is Together. We think about transformative change, particularly in the sector of, higher education. So the question is, how can we go about creating lasting transformative change together? How do we do it, Cathy? From everything that you've seen, from all of your work and experiences, best advice you've got for folks about how do we bring that about, again, lasting transformative change, and we do it together?
To me, earning a degree is transformative. And we've mentioned removing barriers for registration, removing some of these challenges as much as we can. I think we would be doing a disservice if we removed every challenge, and made it a smooth, easy path. And, where's the character development? Where's the building, the learning piece and all of that. So to me, degrees are transformational. Anything we can do to help ensure our students and our student athletes persist to graduation, to me, that's the moment when they walk across that stage. We've got a phrase, and we tell our student athletes often, many people will come to see you compete. In whatever your arena, your avenue, your platform is, more people will come to see you graduate. And those that have had that experience, because they recognize the fact that the degree is transformational, and we are just one piece, one cog in their journey, how we can band together and really say, we will help you, student. We will help you get there. You may be that student that has that one-off thing that no one has ever experienced before, but you are in this unique situation. We will help you. You are not just a number. You are a human. You are important to our space. You are important to our community. And we will help you get there. We will help you get to the finish line and then cross it.
Thanks, Cathy. I mean, that's what draws us to the work, right? I mean, that's what the fact that we do that we have those kind of shared commitments and perspectives, and that we do band together to support what we hope will be, something that will change the life, not just to that student, but then if they choose to have kiddos or, for their parents or their siblings, that it just sends off those kind of positive ripples out into the world, right? Out into broader society, out into, into the future. Cathy, thank you for taking some time and being with us here today. And thank you for tuning in to Together, a higher education podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to hear more, be sure to subscribe so that you'll never miss an episode. Until next time, thanks.
Utes.
Go Utes.
Go Utes.